Let me start with a confession. I wasn't supposed to be here, typing this. According to my daughter, I was supposed to be drooling in a chair, mentally incompetent, and stripped of every dollar I ever earned. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, buckle up. Because the way she tried to pull it off. It wasn't just cruel, it was surgical. Calculated. Like she had been planning to erase me for years. Here's the hook. Last spring, I woke up to find a stranger at my front door holding a thick envelope. Inside. Court papers. My daughter, my only child, was petitioning the court to have me declared legally incompetent. In other words, she wanted guardianship. She wanted control of my money, my house, my accounts, even what food I put in my mouth. Her claim. That I was slipping into dementia. That I was a danger to myself. That I didn't recognize her anymore. Funny thing, though. That morning, I was reading a crossword in pen. Solved half of it before my coffee got cold. Yet according to her, I was barely aware of my own name. Now, I know what you're thinking, there has to be some misunderstanding. Maybe she's worried about you. Maybe she thought you needed help. No. No misunderstanding. My daughter, let's call her Claire, was after one thing, my assets. The house I built with my late wife. The land my father left me. The savings I tucked away for retirement, so I wouldn't be a burden on anyone. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my daughter. And here's the best part, she didn't even tell me first. She filed the petition in secret, then arranged for a doctor, her friend, conveniently, to evaluate me. What she didn't know. I've got more wits left in me than she ever gave me credit for. And once you try to dig a grave for me, you'd better make sure I'm too weak to climb out. Spoiler, I wasn't. And this, friends, is the story of how I turned her little scheme upside down. Piece by piece. Move by move. Until she wished she had never underestimated her old man. Because if she wanted a war, I was going to give her one. And in the end, I wouldn't just survive. I'd win. So. There I was, court papers in hand, staring at my daughter's betrayal in black and white. Her petition said I was confused, forgetful, and incapable of managing basic affairs. Confused? Forgetful? I can still remember the smell of my wife's perfume from 1974, and the exact year Nixon resigned. But sure, let's pretend I don't know my own name. A week later, she sent in the cavalry, a doctor. Or should I say, her doctor. A guy who looked like he ordered, trust me, off a costume rack. Clipboard. Glasses. Toothpaste commercial smile. The whole act. He introduced himself as Dr. Harlan. He said he was there to do a routine evaluation. Routine, my ass. The man barely looked me in the eye before launching into questions straight out of a second-grade workbook. What year is it, Mr. Walker? I told him the year, the month, the day, and the fact that it was the anniversary of Elvis Presley's death. He didn't even blink. Can you remember these 3 words, apple, table, penny? I repeated them back, then added, tax evasion, for flavor. Again, no smile. By the time he left, I could see it in his face, he had already decided. Didn't matter that I answered every question sharp as a tack. Didn't matter that I quoted Shakespeare just to amuse myself. He was going to write whatever my daughter wanted him to write. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the court papers spread out like a war map. And that's when I realized something important. If Claire thought she was the only one who could play dirty, she hadn't been paying attention to the man who raised her. I pulled out my phone. Not to call a lawyer. Not yet. First, I called an old friend from my union days, let's call him Eddie. A man who owed me a favor. And Eddie? He had a talent for digging up dirt. If Claire wanted to bring in her pet doctor, I'd make sure the world knew just what kind of man Dr. Harlan really was. Because here's the thing about people like him, they always leave skeletons behind. And the next morning, Eddie called me back with something that made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. Turns out, Dr. Harlan had a secret. A big one. The kind of secret that could burn his entire career to the ground. And that's when I knew, this was no longer defense. This was offense. When Eddie called me back, his voice had that dangerous little chuckle I remembered from our younger days, the kind of chuckle that meant somebody was about to have a very bad day. He said, "Your daughter's doctor friend? He's got more skeletons than a Halloween aisle." Turns out, Dr. Harlan wasn't just a friendly family physician doing a favor. Nope. He had a disciplinary record buried so deep the average patient would never find it. A suspension 5 years ago for prescription irregularities. Translation: he was selling pills out the back door like candy at a parade. And it got better. Eddie found whispers of a malpractice settlement. Something about a misdiagnosis that cost a patient dearly. Public record, technically, but the kind of thing most people never bother to look for. So while Claire thought she had the perfect expert to tell the court I was losing my mind, I suddenly had the makings of a bombshell in my back pocket. But here's the thing, revenge is like fishing. You don't yank the line the second the fish bites. You let it swim. You let it think it's in control. And then, when the hook sinks in, you reel it slow. So when Dr. Harlan showed up for round 2 of his little evaluation, I played dumb. I answered his questions politely. Smiled. Even pretended to struggle with one of them. He left looking smug. Probably already drafting his little report for the court. And that's when I slid my ace up my sleeve. I drafted a quiet letter to the judge myself. Nothing dramatic. Just a polite note asking that any medical evaluation submitted to the court be from a neutral third party, given Dr. Harlan's well-documented history. I attached the records Eddie dug up. Clean. Simple. Lethal. That letter went out certified mail the same day. But here's the kicker, I didn't tell Claire. I wanted her to strut into court, thinking she had me cornered. I wanted her face when she realized her shiny star witness was about to go down in flames. And oh, friends, the look on her face was everything I hoped for, until I noticed something else. When the judge mentioned Harlan's disciplinary record, Claire didn't look shocked. She didn't look confused. She looked calm. Too calm. Like maybe, just maybe, she already had a backup plan. You'd think exposing her pet doctor would have knocked the wind out of Claire. But no. The moment Judge Henderson raised an eyebrow about Harlan's past issues, she didn't flinch. She didn't protest. She didn't even blink. She just smiled. And that smile? That was worse than anything she could have said. It was the smile of someone who brought 2 knives to a gunfight, just in case. See, Claire wasn't stupid. Cruel, yes. Greedy, absolutely. But not stupid. While I was busy dismantling her doctor, she had already greased the wheels on another front, the medical records. Somewhere, somehow, she got her hands on my private health files. She presented to the court a neat little binder with evidence of my supposed decline. Forgetfulness noted by nurses. Missed appointments. Elevated blood pressure. Scribbled notes from doctors. Here's the problem, half of it was true. I do have high blood pressure. I did miss a follow-up once when my car battery died. And yeah, I forget where I put my glasses sometimes, because I own 5 pairs and misplace them like socks in a dryer. But the other half? Pure fiction. Fabricated entries. Entire visits that never happened. One note even claimed I forgot the name of my own daughter during a checkup. The irony made me laugh out loud in court, though nobody else found it funny. The judge frowned. My lawyer, yes, by then I had finally brought in a lawyer of my own, a sharp bulldog named Janice, leaned over and whispered, "This is dangerous. We'll need to disprove it piece by piece." That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, staring at those fake records. The paper smelled faintly of antiseptic, like it had been copied straight out of a hospital printer. I don't know why, but the smell got under my skin. And then, here's where it gets strange, I noticed something in the margins of one page. Tiny handwriting. Not part of the official notes. A scribble in pencil. Don't trust her. Check the dates. It wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't the doctor's. But whoever wrote it had circled 3 entries in particular, all from the same month. And when I checked my own calendar, I realized something chilling. Those 3 dates, the ones that claimed I was confused and disoriented. I wasn't even in town. I was at my sister's funeral. With a dozen witnesses. Someone out there wanted me to see that. Someone who knew the truth. But who? I couldn't stop staring at that scribble. Don't trust her. Check the dates. It didn't belong there. Doctors don't scrawl cryptic warnings in pencil on official files. Judges don't hand out annotated exhibits. My lawyer certainly hadn't seen it. But there it was, clear as day. Someone, somewhere, wanted me to notice those entries. So I did what any old man with nothing to lose would do, I started digging. I called the clinic listed on the records. Asked for copies of my visit notes from that month. Guess what? Their system showed no appointments under my name for those dates. None. Not even cancelled ones. Next, I called my niece, the one who sat right beside me at my sister's funeral during that exact week. She remembered it vividly. Even had photos of me delivering a shaky little eulogy. Proof. Solid, undeniable proof. So the entries were fake. Straight up forgeries. But that left me with two questions. Who forged them? Who warned me? That night, as I was sorting through the paperwork at my kitchen table again, my war map was growing thicker by the day, I noticed something else, a faint watermark on the corner of one page. Not hospital letterhead. Not legal stationery. Just a blurry imprint, like it had been copied on a cheap home printer. The mark read, J.H. 2019. Now, I may be old, but I'm not blind. J.H. were the initials of a cousin of mine, Jimmy Harker. And Jimmy? He just so happened to work in IT at the very hospital my daughter's little binder supposedly came from. I hadn't spoken to Jimmy in years, not since a blowout over a family inheritance squabble. But I knew one thing, the man had access. And if those files passed through his hands, maybe he wasn't my enemy. Maybe he was the ghost in the paperwork. So I gave him a call. Awkward, yes. He picked up cautious, like he'd been expecting trouble. And when I told him what I found, he went dead silent for 10 seconds. Finally, he muttered, "Uncle, you weren't supposed to see that. Claire, she asked me to change things. I didn't want to. But she threatened to ruin me if I didn't. So I left you a message. The pencil note. The circled dates. That was him. Jimmy had been my mole without meaning to. But here's the kicker, before I could even ask him for more, he whispered. She's not working alone. And then the line went dead. When Jimmy hung up on me, I just sat there staring at the dead line. She's not working alone. The words stuck to my brain like glue. My daughter was ambitious, yes. Manipulative, sure. But pulling fake records? Leaning on family to alter hospital files? That required precision. Access. A safety net. So who the hell was helping her? A few days later, I got my answer. Not through Jimmy, he vanished off the radar after that call, but through a chance encounter at the grocery store of all places. There I was, checking out with a loaf of rye bread, when I saw her, my late wife's sister, Aunt Linda. A woman who hadn't called me once since my wife's funeral. Always hovering in the background at family gatherings, quiet as wallpaper, except when money was involved. She spotted me, and instead of her usual fake pleasantries, she marched right up and hissed. You should just let Claire take care of things. Fighting her will only make it worse for you. That sentence set every alarm bell in my head ringing. I hadn't even told her about the guardianship petition. How the hell did she know? So I leaned in and asked, calm as ice, Linda, how much is she paying you? She froze. Not shocked at the accusation, shocked that I said it out loud. Then she turned beet red, muttered something about looking out for family, and stormed off. Well, there it was. Snake number 2. Claire had roped in her aunt. Now, you might be thinking, why would Linda bother? Simple. Greed. My will left her exactly zero. My assets? All set to go to Claire when I passed. Unless, of course, Claire made sure to share the spoils early. That night, I found myself pacing my kitchen, thinking about how quickly my circle had shrunk. Daughter against me. Sister-in-law against me. A doctor on their leash. A cousin scared into silence. It felt like the walls were closing in. Until, while rummaging through some old files of my own, I found something I had completely forgotten about. A safe deposit box key. My wife's. The one she never told anyone about, not even Claire. Inside that box. I had no idea. But my gut told me this: if there was any leverage left, any hidden card my wife tucked away, it would be there. And just like that, the fear melted into something else entirely: resolve. Because if Claire wanted a war, I was finally ready to bring her one. The bank lobby smelled like dust and lemon polish, the kind of sterile scent that always reminded me of funerals. Fitting, I suppose, given what I was there for. The safe deposit box was small. Plain. Nothing special. But when the clerk slid it across the table, my hands shook. My wife had kept this hidden for years. She wasn't a secretive woman, not with me. So why hide this? Inside was a thin folder tied with faded ribbon. No jewelry. No bonds. Just paper. I untied the ribbon, and there it was, a handwritten letter, addressed to me. The ink was faded, but I knew her handwriting instantly, curved and careful, the way she wrote out birthday cards. The letter began with a single line that punched me straight in the chest. If you're reading this, it means Claire has turned against you. I swear my heart stopped. She went on to write about her suspicions. Years ago, before she died, she noticed little things: money missing from her purse, lies about study trips in college, manipulative tactics that made her uneasy. She never wanted to admit it, but she worried Claire had inherited more of her brother's cruelty than our love. I pray I am wrong, she wrote. But if I am right, you must protect yourself. Do not let her take what we built together. The folder included something else, 2 photocopies of old property deeds. One of them was the land I'd inherited from my father, the same land Claire was circling like a vulture. But this deed had a handwritten amendment from years ago, signed and notarized. It placed that land in a trust. A trust she didn't know existed. If Claire got guardianship, she'd seize my accounts, my house, maybe even my pension, but not the land. That was locked. Protected. Untouchable. And suddenly, I realized why she was fighting so hard, pulling doctors and relatives into her scheme. She thought she was grabbing the whole kingdom. She didn't know half the crown jewels were locked away. I sat in that cold little room, clutching my wife's words, and I felt something I hadn't in months: strength. Not just mine, ours. Hers and mine, together. She'd seen this coming, in her quiet way, and left me the tools to fight back. But here's the thing about weapons: they're only good if you use them. And I knew just how to do it. Because the next court date was coming up fast. And this time, I wasn't walking in as prey. I was walking in with a secret Claire could never see coming. Courtrooms are strange places. Quiet, heavy, like everyone's holding their breath at the same time. The second hearing was packed tighter than the first. Claire came in wearing her best, dutiful daughter costume, pearls, soft cardigan, eyes just a little watery like she might cry at any second. She played the part well. Too well. Her lawyer started off smooth, painting me as a stubborn old man in denial. He waved that binder of medical records around like it was holy scripture. Claimed I was confused, prone to paranoia, and unable to manage finances responsibly. I sat there, calm, watching Claire out of the corner of my eye. She never looked at me once. Just stared straight ahead, chin lifted, as if I was already a ghost. Then it was Janice's turn, my bulldog of a lawyer. She stood, adjusted her glasses, and said 6 words that changed the entire atmosphere in that room. Your Honor, we have new evidence. She laid the trust documents on the judge's desk, complete with notarized signatures. She explained how the land Claire had been drooling over was legally protected, placed beyond her reach decades ago. You could feel the air shift. Claire's mask wavered for just a second, her lips twitched, her jaw clenched, but she forced herself back into character. And then came the knockout punch. Janice slid a copy of my wife's letter across the desk. She didn't read it out loud, thank God, but she made sure the judge saw enough. My wife had concerns about Claire's behavior years ago. Concerns that suddenly didn't look like paranoia at all. Claire's lawyer objected, sputtering about irrelevant hearsay. The judge shut him down with a raised hand. That's when I looked directly at Claire for the first time that day. Just looked. Didn't speak. Didn't smile. Just held her gaze. And in that moment, her mask cracked. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But her eyes went dark, like shutters slamming down on a window. Cold. Flat. The performance was over, if only for a heartbeat. Everyone in that courtroom saw it. Even the judge. Especially the judge. By the end of the session, the petition was still technically alive. Claire's lawyer begged for more time to review the new evidence. But the tone had shifted. The narrative wasn't, poor daughter saving her senile father anymore. It was, maybe the daughter's got an agenda. Walking out of that courtroom, I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was wary. Because if there's one thing I've learned about Claire, it's this: when she loses ground, she doesn't retreat. She escalates. I knew Claire wouldn't take the courtroom hit lying down. What I didn't know was how fast she'd fire back. It started small. A phone call from my bank. Mr. Walker, we're just calling to confirm that you requested a transfer of $15,000 to a new account. I hadn't. Turns out, someone had been trying to access my accounts online. Password resets. Phishing emails. Even a forged signature faxed to the branch. They froze everything immediately, thank God, but the intent was clear: if she couldn't win in court, she'd try to bleed me dry on the side. Then the anonymous phone calls began. Always at night. Always the same routine. I'd pick up, and there'd be silence. Just heavy breathing on the other end before the line went dead. Childish, yes. But unnerving when you're alone in a creaky house at midnight. And then came the social smears. Neighbors started looking at me differently. One even asked if I needed help with my medications. I had no idea why, until I found out Claire had been whispering that I was unstable. That I'd wandered off once and had to be brought home. Complete lies, of course, but lies travel fast when people want gossip. I felt the net tightening. The legal fight was one thing, but now she was coming at me from every angle: money, reputation, even my sanity. It was like she wanted to corner me until I either surrendered, or snapped. But here's the thing about pushing an old man into a corner: sometimes you find out the old man has claws. So I sharpened mine. I made an appointment with my own doctor, a real one, not one of her puppets. Full evaluation. Memory tests. Physicals. Every box checked. I walked out with a clean bill of health, notarized and sealed, ready to be dropped on the judge's desk. And then, just as I was starting to feel the ground steady beneath me again, something landed in my mailbox. No return address. No note inside. Just a single photograph. It was an old family picture, taken in our backyard 20 years ago. My wife, myself, Claire, smiling with ice cream cones in our hands. But someone had taken a marker and scribbled over my face. I stared at that photo for a long time. It wasn't just the marker across my face, it was the intent. Whoever sent it wanted me to feel erased. Like I didn't exist. At first, I assumed it was Claire. She'd already been playing dirty. Smears, financial sabotage, late-night calls. Sending me a defaced photo fit her new hobby of psychological warfare. But something about it didn't add up. The picture itself was old. Really old. From a family barbecue in '04. I didn't even know where the original print was anymore. Claire sure as hell wouldn't have it. So how did someone else get their hands on it? I flipped it over. On the back, faint pencil marks: "You're not crazy." She is. My stomach turned. If it was Claire, why leave a note that implied she was the dangerous one? No, this was something else. Someone else. So I started digging again. Pulled out the dusty box of photo albums from the attic. Sure enough, that original photo was missing. A whole page torn out. Which meant whoever had sent me the crossed-out copy had been inside my house. Recently. That night, I locked every window and double-bolted the doors. Still didn't sleep a wink. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like someone waiting. The next day, I took the photo to Janice. She frowned, turned it over in her hands, and said, "Mr. Walker, this isn't just intimidation. This is groundwork. They're trying to rattle you into slipping up in court. If you start looking paranoid, if you start sounding unhinged, she wins." She was right. That was the trap. But if someone was bold enough to sneak into my house to steal a photo, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. So I set a trap of my own. Installed cameras. Cheap ones, yes, but good enough. Pointed at every entry point in the house. And wouldn't you know it, 3 nights later, the motion alarm pinged on my phone at 2:13 a.m. I opened the app. The grainy footage showed a shadow at my back door. Slim build. Hood pulled up. Whoever it was tried the knob, then froze when the deadbolt didn't budge. And then, before walking away, they turned and looked straight into the camera. It wasn't Claire. It was Linda. When I saw Linda's face on that grainy footage, I felt 2 things at once, rage and relief. Rage that she'd slithered onto my property like a thief in the night. Relief that I finally had her dead to rights. I didn't wait long. The next morning, I printed out still frames from the footage, her face lit by the porch light, her hand on my back door, and slipped them into an envelope. Then I drove straight to her house. She answered the door with her usual fake sweetness, robe tied loose, hair still in curlers. "Oh, what a surprise," she said. I handed her the envelope. She opened it, glanced at the first photo, and went white. "Want to explain why you were creeping around my house at 2 in the morning?" I asked. For a second, I thought she'd deny it. But then her face twisted. Not into guilt, into something nastier. "You think you're clever," she spat. "But Claire warned me you'd do this. She said you'd start imagining enemies. She said it would only be a matter of time before you accused your own family." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Imagination? That's your face, Linda. The camera doesn't lie." Her voice dropped low. "You should have just rolled over, old man. Claire was going to take care of you. Make sure the rest of us weren't forgotten. But no, you had to fight. Now you're just making it worse for yourself." That line right there told me everything. Claire had cut her a deal. If Linda backed her play, she'd get a piece of the pie. My assets divided like vultures picking a carcass. "Let me guess," I said. "She promised you the house. Or maybe the land." Linda didn't answer. Which was answer enough. I left her standing in the doorway, shaking with anger, but I didn't walk away empty-handed. Because that confrontation gave me exactly what I needed, proof that Claire wasn't just a greedy daughter, she was recruiting accomplices with promises of inheritance that wasn't hers to give. The judge would want to hear that. And soon, so would everyone else. But as satisfying as it was to catch Linda, I couldn't shake one thing. The way she said, "making it worse for yourself." The venom in her voice. It didn't sound like a threat about court. It sounded like something else. And just 2 nights later, I found out exactly what she meant. It happened on a Thursday. Quiet night, nothing unusual. I'd made myself a sandwich, poured a glass of milk, and was halfway through an old western on TV when I heard it, glass breaking. Not the TV. Not a dropped cup. A window. Every nerve in my body lit up. I killed the lights, grabbed the heavy oak cane I keep by the door, and moved slow, careful. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it from the other room. The sound came again, footsteps. Inside my house. I peeked around the corner and saw a shadow moving through the kitchen. Slim. Quick. Gloved hands rifling through drawers like they were looking for something. I don't know what came over me, but I stepped forward and said, "Wrong house." The figure froze, then spun around. Mask over the face. No words. Just a flash of metal in their hand, knife. My cane came down hard on their wrist before they could take a step. The knife clattered to the floor. They cursed, shoved me hard into the wall, and bolted for the back door. By the time I stumbled outside, they were gone. Vanished into the dark. I called the police, of course. They showed up, took statements, bagged the knife for prints. But the officer's tone told me not to expect much. Could be random, he said. Break-ins happen all the time. Yeah. Random. Right. Because burglars always scribble over family photos and stalk their targets in courtrooms. This wasn't random. This was Claire escalating again. Linda's venomous, "You're making it worse for yourself," suddenly made perfect sense. The cops left. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. I picked up the knife bag the officer had dropped, and that's when I noticed something they'd missed. On the knife handle, scratched faint but visible, were two initials, CW. Claire Walker. My daughter. She hadn't just sent people after me. She'd armed them with her own damn knife. And that's when I knew, this wasn't just about money anymore. She wanted me erased. Literally. I knew the cops weren't going to save me. The courts might, if I could arm them with the right ammunition. So I set my own kind of trap. First step, cameras. Not just the cheap ones this time, I upgraded. Motion sensors, audio, cloud backups she couldn't touch. Every room, every door. If anyone so much as sneezed in my living room, I'd have the footage. Second step, bait. I called Claire. First time in weeks. My voice shaky, tired, almost defeated. "Maybe you were right," I said. "Maybe I do need someone to look after me. I don't want to fight anymore." Hook, line, sinker. She softened immediately, sugar dripping from her voice. "Dad, I just want what's best for you. Let me come over, we'll talk about it." I told her the spare key was under the mat. It wasn't. But I wanted to see what she'd do. Sure enough, 2 nights later, while I pretended to sleep, the cameras caught her slipping into my house with Linda right behind her. Not to check on me. Not to comfort me. No, they went straight to my study. To the desk where I keep my files. The audio picked up every word. "Claire, if we can get his medical notes and the land trust papers, it's over. He won't have a leg to stand on. Linda, are you sure he won't wake up?" Claire, laughs, "Please. He's halfway gone already." And then, the moment of gold, Claire, muttering under her breath. "Old man doesn't even realize I'd rather see him gone than let him drag this out." I didn't move. I didn't interrupt. I just let the cameras drink it all in. By the time they left, I had exactly what I needed, proof that my daughter wasn't just after guardianship. She was after elimination. The next morning, I sent the footage straight to Janice. She didn't say much on the phone, just this, "Mr. Walker, you may have just ended her." And she was right. But I wasn't finished yet. Because ending her in court wasn't enough. Not after what she tried to do in my own home. No, Claire needed to feel what it was like to be erased. When I was younger, I read somewhere that revenge isn't about rage, it's about patience. Rage is loud, sloppy, easy to spot. Patience? That's where you really make someone bleed. So I didn't rush. I built the noose, one knot at a time. First, I fed Claire rope. I let her believe I was backing down. Told her lawyer I'd consider a settlement. Told Linda I was too tired to keep fighting. They took the bait so fast it was almost insulting. Second, I worked the allies. Linda's husband, my late wife's brother, always hated how loud and overbearing she was. Over coffee, I showed him the footage of her breaking into my study. The look on his face. Priceless. By the end of that cup, he was promising to testify against his own wife if it came to it. Third, the quiet leaks. Copies of the footage, transcripts of Claire's words, anonymous envelopes dropped at places that mattered, her law firm, her church, even the country club she liked to brag about. Suddenly, whispers started following her like a shadow. "Did you hear about Claire? trying to put her own father away. And last, the masterpiece. Court day. I walked in looking frail, leaning heavy on my cane, eyes downcast. Claire strutted in like she'd already won, heels clicking like war drums. She smiled at me across the aisle, that smug, poisonous smile. She didn't know what was coming. When it was my turn, Janice stood tall and said, "Your Honor, the defense would like to enter new evidence." And then, clip by clip, word by word, we played it all. Claire's voice filling the courtroom, "Old man doesn't even realize I'd rather see him gone." The silence afterward was suffocating. Claire went pale. Linda started crying. And I just sat there, cane in my lap, watching my daughter's empire crumble. But I wasn't done. Oh no. Because I had one final card to play, something that would take everything she valued and burn it to ash. There was a public unspooling that I will not pretend was pleasant. Her name was said in tones that were curiously final. The country club people stopped returning her calls. The firm that had been happy to bill her suddenly found conflicts of interest they'd never noticed. Linda's alliances evaporated. Dr. Harlan's license was reviewed, then revoked. Jimmy, who'd helped edit a record under pressure, testified for leniency and then disappeared for a while, which suited everyone. The legal world moved with the slow, satisfying certainty of a machine designed to correct injustice when given the right inputs. But the real, quiet part of the finale, the part one had been saving for myself, was softer and more surgical. I had wanted Claire to feel what she tried to make me feel, erased, irrelevant, stripped of legacy. I did it without shouting. I did it with paper, signatures, and a touch of theatricality that my late wife would have loved. The trust my wife had set up was ironclad. With the judge's permission and Janice's steady hand, I amended the final allocation of my estate, effective only after I was gone. Claire could no longer be a beneficiary in any capacity. The house, which she'd wanted to sell, was left to a surprising place, the little community center where I taught woodworking for neighborhood kids, the one Claire had mocked for, a waste of time. The land, my father's land, was to be placed into a conservation trust with a stipulation that it never be sold for development. Linda's promised cut vanished with the legal documents that stopped her cold. Money that had been earmarked to a family was redirected to causes my wife and I had quietly supported over the years: schools, the animal shelter, the local historical society that kept our town story alive. Poetic? Maybe. Cold? Perhaps. Satisfying? Deeply. Because Claire had been trying to claim a future built on my erasure, I gave her a future built from the very thing she despised. Her inheritance turned into the town's future. Her trophies became bulletin board flyers for youth classes. The photographs she had tried to destroy were catalogued, conserved, and displayed in a small exhibit at the community center, except her face wasn't in any of them. We framed the old backyard photo, careful and respectful, and where I had stood, there was an empty space. A plaque explained why some chapters are closed by choice. That was the symbolic cut. Not vicious, but precise. She watched as her name faded from family things. She watched the house she wanted be filled with laughter that had nothing to do with her. She watched the land become a place of quiet walking, not profit margins. And when she tried to fight it, through lawyers, through threats, through the last frantic pleas, no one wanted to take her calls. People had seen the footage. People had decided. The projector hummed to life like a small, indifferent engine, bureaucratic, clinical, impossible to mistake. The courtroom lights dimmed. Claire's face, blown up on the wall, took up half the room, every smirk, every practiced pity, every tiny curl of entitlement. For the first time in a long time, she couldn't look away. They told me revenge would make me less human. They were wrong. Revenge, I learned, is not a diminution, it's a measurement. It measures how far someone will go to break you, and how far you will go to prove them wrong. When Janice pressed play, my life, our life, ran like a movie. Snatches of footage, grainy and horrible and true, Claire whispering about land and ledgers, Linda rifling through my desk, the masked intruder with the knife, the defaced photograph, my wife's letter folded into the trust papers. Every lie became a stitch in a rope. Every stitch tightened. The first twist wasn't legal. It was human. Linda's husband, who had sworn to me over coffee that he'd testify, stood up mid-playback. He walked to the bench, took the oath, and recited a string of events he'd been too ashamed to admit before: the promises, the meetings, the time he'd handed Claire a key and watched her go through my things. When he said, "I helped her because I was afraid she'd ruin me," the room felt smaller, like it had been carved out of the world Claire thought she owned. Then the lawyers did their work. The state prosecutor, who'd quietly been following the case once the break-in became more than random, leaned forward and spoke calmly. She had two things the civil court loved: evidence of intent, and witnesses willing to swear to it. The tape that had nearly been destroyed, what a foolish plan, to try to erase a recording, was now Exhibit A. The knife, which bore the initials CW, matched finger swabs and phone records. The bank's flagged transfers lined up with attempted access dates. The forged clinic notes were traced back through a sloppy chain of digital copies to a laptop registered to an account Claire had used to pay Dr. Harlan's hush fees. She tried to stand. Claire always stood when she should have been sitting. This time she trembled. Her lawyer whispered, legal cadences like sugar on poison, but the sugar wouldn't stick. The judge read the room like a compass. He read the playback like scripture. Attempted coercion, he said slowly, like tasting the phrase. Conspiracy. Burglary. Fraud. I did not exult as she was led away in cuffs later that year. That would have been grotesque. But I did stand in the courtroom and let the recorder capture my truth, that I had been betrayed, that I had forgiven in places where I could, and that I had protected what mattered most. I wanted the record to show the whole of it, the small acts and the monstrous ones, the letter my wife had left, the trust she had set, the love that had been co-opted and weaponized. I wanted it all plain, so that when people asked why I chose to fight, the answer would be readable in the margin. There was a last, private twist that only I and a few witnesses knew. In the last hearing before the settlement, Janice produced an envelope from my wife's old box, a small stack of letters Claire had written as a teenager, angry and entitled, yes, but also raw, unguarded, full of contradictions. In one, she confessed to lying about a scholarship to cover up a petty theft. In another, she begged for attention in ways that were cruel and then apologetic. The judge read them, not as proof of criminal intent now, but as a map of a person who had always been at odds with herself. He recommended counseling as part of any probation. That part, rehabilitation, was the only mercy I felt I could afford. And so it ended not like a Hollywood purge, but like a well-run small-town opera: tidy legal notes, quiet community game, a daughter reduced to a cautionary tale, and an old man who got his life back without pouring gasoline on anything. I visited Claire once, in visiting hours, because cruelty has never been my currency. She sat across from me, eyes rimmed with fatigue, hair thinner, arrogance dissolved into something small and raw. She tried to speak. I let her. She apologized in stops and starts, some of it for real, some of it performative. I listened. Then I did something that surprised both of us. I took from my coat a copy of the backyard photo, clean, restored, with my face intact, and I slid it across the table. "This is where I stood," I said. "You'll remember the rest." Her fingers trembled when she touched the paper. I don't think she believed in paper anymore. I do. Paper keeps promises. Paper preserves the truth. Paper can't be convinced to lie unless someone forges it. Someone did forge things, once, and because of that, we'd all had to live through a trial. She looked up at me, for once not performing. "You made them take everything," she said, voice small. "You left me nothing." I smiled, not meanly, not with triumph, but with the flat, careful kindness that comes from having your hands pried open and finding, instead of emptiness, a schedule. "I left you choices," I said. "And a chance to be better. Use it." She didn't. Not entirely. But the offer was there, documented and audible, and maybe somewhere in the cold place she'd been living, that mattered. Now I walk the land my father left me, and I teach kids how to whittle straight handles and make straight joints. I sit at the community center's window and watch people I never thought I'd know nod hello. I sleep nights with locks that work and cameras that don't lie. My wife's letter sits framed by my bedside. The trust does what it was meant to do: it keeps the land green and the money where it helps people, not predators. There's a scar where the war used to be, but it's not ugly. It's a reminder. A map. A line drawn in decades of love, anger, hope, and paperwork. If you listen to the recordings I left, because, yes, I recorded a few things along the way, robot voice narration and all, they'll tell you this plainly: I wasn't perfect. I failed. I loved the wrong person sometimes. But I kept my head. I fought with the tools I had. And in the end, I won something better than money. I won the right story. If you're listening with your ears tuned to cynicism, you'll think this is a revenge tale about an old man getting even. If you're listening like an old friend, quiet and scarred, you'll hear that it's about boundaries. About the difference between giving and gifting away. About the quiet mechanics of justice when the people with power forget how to be human. And if you're thinking, morbidly curious, whether I'll ever be tempted to do it again, rewrite the book, change the names, here's the last thing I'll tell you, in a voice that is both crackling and precise, like a recording stuck between memory and circuitry. I set the camera to record the last thing I said in court. It plays now and then, when the house is very still. The machine reads me back with the flat cadence you asked for at the start of this story, robotic, steady, impossible to interrupt. The last line of that recording is simple, and I keep it because sometimes simple is the only sermon a man needs. Do not mistake kindness for weakness, the machine says in my voice. And do not ever think you can erase what you do not own. The projector clicks off. The courtroom clears. The land stays green. The children in my class call me Grandpa like I deserve it. The photo on my wall keeps my face exactly where it belongs. And somewhere across town, a woman reads the empty space that used to be her inheritance and learns, perhaps too late, that you can't build a future on someone else's disappearance.